What is up, y'all? My name is Brandon. Let's talk about some books. First off, I just want to say thank you to every single person who clicked on my last video and liked, commented, subscribed. It means the world to me to have people willing to engage with literature nowadays. And I received so many nice messages here and on Instagram about just how the video was and how they're looking forward to seeing more, and that makes me happy, and so I'm excited to keep that going. So 10 books to get to know me. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably know a lot of books that are going to be on this list. If you don't, then these are going to be new and help introduce myself to you. So the first book is going to be The Trial by Franz Kafka. This edition was originally published in 1998 in a translation by Brian Mitchell. It was originally published in German in 1925. But this book is a paradigm for human society, human nature, the mental struggles that we feel as a member of society today. And it's about a man who was sentenced for crimes that he has no knowledge of committing at all. He doesn't know what he did. He doesn't know how to deal with the fact that he has committed these crimes. Nobody will tell him what he did. So that's kind of just a source of pressure for him. And he can't really contact anyone in this secretive court system that he's entrenched in. He goes on with his life as normal, but there's always this thing weighing on him, which I think is how appropriate that is for our lives, where we just have these things weighing on us all the time. And I think it shows the condemnation of being a human being, where we feel that every day, seemingly so many things that are on top of us with no beginning, no end. And I think that's really appropriate because this book is actually unfinished, but it doesn't feel like it when you read it. It feels like it's supposed to be the way it is, which is perfect. Does suffering have a purpose? That's one of the questions that this asks. Can we challenge the world in the face of endless confusion? Kafka genuinely did not know how to answer that question, but I think the nature of the story is so genuine that you're able to see what he really felt like. Can Kafka be annoying at times with relentless description and going on and on about minor things throughout the story? Yes, but the perspective of this story is one that it's almost an intrapersonal conversation where everything's in his head, where he's thinking about his life and what he's going through. So it seems right, because that's kind of how we think about our lives in our own heads every single day. Full of miscommunication, misperceptions, and it's very much appreciated. The second book on my list is one that I read a long time ago, but I definitely want to reread it. It is a brilliant, heartbreaking book that I honestly do think about every now and again. This is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. It was originally published as a short story in 1957 and then was turned into a novel and published in 1966. So this book is a perfect example of playing around with conventions of spelling and grammar that I think really makes me love how transcendent fiction can be, is the fact that you can manipulate things to show something deeper than just what the plot is conveying, which I think is amazing. A psychological story of a man undergoes experiments who is trying to make himself smarter. The ending will absolutely stay with you, so I highly recommend this. This is also a story of human connection, of love, of what we can be as people, of being happy with who you are and what you have in the midst of wishing for change all the time. But it's sad, which in books is something that I love. It's not, real life isn't happy, so books need to reflect that. And I love books that don't shy away from not sugarcoating things and making it seem like everything is perfect all the time. The third book on my list is one that has a perhaps negative reputation and one that people joke about a lot. And I don't really care. I think that it's a work of genius, and I will die on the hill of saying that the book and the author are both geniuses in their own right. That book is none other than Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Now, I don't think you can watch an interview with David Foster Wallace and think that he was not a genius. The way he responds to questions and interacts with the interviewer and reacts to how he is doing in the interview. I think that's something that's kind of unspoken, but you can see how much he cares and how much he thinks of himself. And I think that comes through in this book. This book predicted so much of what's in our world right now that we deem to be problematic, such as doom scrolling, such as photo and video filters, such as streaming services. And I mean, the title refers to a piece of entertainment that when you watch it, you simply become paralyzed and you can't move, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't do anything, so you end up just dying. And while that is metaphorical, it is also very real to some extent in our current world. The story of two people, one of which is set in a tennis academy where they're kind of training to become pro tennis players. The other is set in a halfway house, both around Boston, Massachusetts. And there's kind of a third storyline where these Canadian terrorists are trying to become their own independent nation, which is a more minor part of the story, but is also there. This book is about the demands that are placed on us every single day by ourselves and the world, and how we manage them when there's so much noise all around us every single day. How to break through all of that noise and get to what really matters. It's about addiction and pain, how the world is unfair, but it is the world we have, so we must live in it. It's about being human and not knowing what others are going through. Though it is a societal commentary, it's still grounded in the humanity that's there, the individual person that the story is being told through the perspective of. Excellent book. Yes, it's long, but it's worth it. All right, if you follow me on Instagram, you definitely know that I love this book. It is probably my favorite book that's been published in the past 20 years, at least, and one that I recommend to everybody at least to try, if not to enjoy it. That book is Solenoid by MIRCEA, translated by Sean Cotter. This was originally published in 2022 as an English translation, and it's easily my favorite book of last year that I read. I read it at the end of the year, and probably my second favorite book of all time, just for the emotion that I felt while I read this. When I got to the end, I genuinely felt like I didn't want it to end. And I know people say that all the time, like, I didn't want the book to end. But I really did feel like this. And it was one of the few instances where I genuinely noticed that I felt like that. Masterful display of style, translation, word choice, and description, both internal and external description. So the story centers on a man who is understood to be CînRTânRESCU himself, who imagines his life taking a different path than what it really took. And it's based on a real event that happened in his life where he gave a poetry reading and people actually really loved it. And he kind of imagines what would have happened to his life if people had laughed at him and hated his poem that he read out loud. It is absolutely absurd, surreal, chaotic, but it still grounds itself in not making them absurd for absurdity's sake, but kind of showing that our minds reach for that kind of thing subconsciously. It deals with themes of ontology, epistemology, existentialism, philosophy, love, and really asks the question, what if things were different? I don't really think that I can say too much more without giving away any parts of it, but I would definitely say I think it's absolutely worth giving it a try. Okay, this next book is from an author who is relatively unknown, but one that deserves a lot more praise than he gets. And this was his only book that I've read so far. I definitely plan on reading all the rest of his works. He just published something new this year. This book in particular is well worth the read and one that really stuck with me after I read it. That book is Miracle Boy by Jack Moody. Jack actually sent me a copy of this and The Lights That Dim, his other novel that he released recently. I think it was 2023. And he is very accessible on Instagram. If you're interested, definitely message him and see, ask him what he would recommend you read. Because from what I understand, they are subtly different, but similar to Solenoid in that it's kind of phantasmagoric, where it doesn't feel real. Sometimes it feels dreamlike almost. This is based in a world where Moody literally had a psychotic breakdown as he was writing this book, and alcohol-induced neurotic dissociation with reality, which absolutely comes across in this book, and it's one that those really hit you as those types of things and not simply somebody writing that just to be writing it. It has metafictional aspects similar to Solenoid, where you are asking questions of what would have happened if his life had been different and how to deal with those choices of our actions and the consequences they have and what we can do in the aftermath. Like I said, you can reach out to him on Instagram and see if maybe any of his other works appeal to you. My next book has a reputation for being difficult, and it's one that I have a very long review of on my Instagram. And so if you're interested in the themes of this next book, I would definitely suggest you go check that out. This book is Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. This is about a man who is traveling across the U.S. towards the end of World War II, looking for a mysterious rocket, and he's got a strange connection to this rocket, and there's Nazis and there's, flying balloons and just an array of experiences that are incredibly disorienting and challenging to the reader. We really get to Pynchon's vision of humanity and society as a whole, which is pretty much a love of death, a love of war. And there are those themes with postmodern works like this, such as paranoia, freedom, salvation, the state of nature, and war, and the complexity that comes with all of those. It can be frustrating at times to read this. I would definitely recommend using a guide to just go through each section to make sure that you're clear on what has been happening in the story so far. It's extremely dense with names, places, pop culture references, made up words, anything you can imagine. Pynchon put it in this book. I think this is timeless though, and that's where the value is for me, and not that it feels like it's written 50 years ago. It feels like it could be fitting to any era of society depending on who is reading it and what time period. It can apply. Those major themes are not singular in their time period. It's definitely not for everybody, and many people might try it and give up. I'm definitely going to be rereading it in a couple of years just because I want to try without a guide and see what I can catch a second time. As you can see, I used a lot of tabs the first time I read it, just to track different things like mentions of the rocket, different themes that I noticed, sections where I just love the writing, but definitely going to be rereading this. So I recommend it, but again, not for everybody. So this next book is undisputably, I think, a masterpiece. The book is 2666 by Roberto Bolaño, translated by Natasha Wimmer. This was originally published in 2004. After Bolaño's death, he did not finish this book, just like The Trial, it is unfinished, but the nature of its publication being posthumous, I think, adds a level of depth to it that allows it to transcend and become something more than just a book that was written. The book is made up of 5 parts set in the fictional town of Santa Teresa in Mexico that deal with different elements of the town, whether it's about drawing people into the town or about the events that occur within it. I will say part 4 is a couple hundred pages long. It goes into great detail about crimes committed against women based on real crimes committed in Mexico. Extremely brutal, and if you're going to give this a try, I would just say make sure you understand what you're getting into when you get to that part. I do think that its connection to the story makes it have more weight because of the fact that it's about these horrible crimes, but also because of the themes that it has, such as societal critique and breakdowns of authority, how the police kind of can't catch the person who's responsible for these, tragedy, class and wealth gaps, because obviously a lot of these women who are having these crimes committed against them are part of the working class and lower socioeconomic status. All the other parts of this seem to weave around each other, and they don't give anything away up front. So once you get to the end, you definitely see more of those connections. But again, because it's unfinished, some things might be left blank, and I think that's okay. Bolaño said he wished that he could write a masterpiece, and I think he did so with this novel. The next book is one that I actually mentioned in my first video. I was trying to decide which one of these to include in this video, but I chose this one because I think it maintains the absolutely insane character work that was begun in the first volumes and brings in more elements of, flashbacks, magic, without it being overwhelming to the reader. And of course, book 4 of the Dark Tower series, Wizard and Glass by Stephen King, published in 1997. Upon finishing the series, I think the brilliance of this book really comes across, and it tells the backstory of the main character, who is the gunslinger Roland, and how he became who he is in the present of the series. It's about love and connection and how we develop with all our baggage and trauma and heartbreak and the emotions that come with becoming somebody other people can rely on. One thing I'll mention if you're thinking about reading this series is to at least give the first 2 books a try instead of just the first one. I think that a lot of times people read the first one and they kind of are turned off by the series. But the first book is a little bit different than the others. So if you're going to go for it, definitely go for at least the first 2 books. That way you can really get an idea of if you're going to like it or not. If you don't like the second book, then I would say it's probably not going to be for you. I would go so far as to say this book would have serious value without reading the other volumes, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think that this story definitely builds layer upon layer upon layer and absolutely deserves its praise in the series, and it's one of my favorites ever. Okay, my next book is my favorite classic that I've read so far. It's one that I'm sure a lot of people have already read, actually. I have to give it its praise here. That book is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This one was translated from French by Robin Buss. It was originally published in 1844, 1845 serially, which I think is really interesting. Been a good idea maybe to read it as a series where you read, you can look up a list of when it was originally published and kind of go through it in the order that he published it, with waiting a little bit in between each section, just kind of how they really had to read it in the 1840s. This is an incredible tale of betrayal and revenge centered on Edmond Dantes, who is a imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. He ends up staying there for 14 years. And upon his escape, he ends up finding a treasure and becoming the Count of Monte Cristo and becomes wealthy beyond belief. And so this book kind of goes through his journey of getting revenge on those who put him in prison. I mean, this book will absolutely have you cheering for Dantes while reading. And I think that's incredible that a book that was written 180 years ago can still have that effect on people today. I would say this is absolutely a must read for people, or a must try. So my 10th book is going to be OMENSETTE'S Luck by William H. Gass. Gass is my favorite writer of all time at this point. I have read 3 of his books, and all are subtly different, but all have his trademark style of being so poetic and musical in how they are told. Still quite accessible, I think. If you're reading Gass for the first time, I would say to start with either here or In the Heart of the Country, which is his short story collection. If you are reading him for the first time here, you may be jarred by his style, but I think the narrative really does still come back during this story because of what happens throughout. That kind of makes it more engaging to read instead of something that's difficult for difficulty's sake. It's about a man named Omensetter who goes into a town to the dismay of the reverend of the town, whose inner monologue takes up probably half of the book, and how he hopes for his downfall and his luck that he has is not fair, how he feels oppressed by him almost. It touches on what we become when we entertain those thoughts of negativity, madness in our preconceived notions, and wishing for other people to fail. Kind of like, is all we're born for the hatred of another person. Like I said before, the most interesting and gripping part of it for me was the nature of the language, the musicality, the poetry of what the prose is. Makes Gass, again, one of my favorite writers of all time. His rhyme, his meter, his alliteration that he uses is just something that makes every sentence something special to read. Again, if you're interested in reading anything from Gass, I would suggest either this or his short story collection, In the Heart of the Country. That one, if you want something a little bit easier. This one, if you want something longer, that's a little bit more difficult, but come on, the difficulty is fun. Okay, I know I said 10 books. I couldn't do this without doing at least one honorable mention, and I chose this one because it's short stories, but it's something that I can come back to again and again and get something new out of it, even just reading one or two of these stories. I had a very hard time leaving him off of this list. That book is The Collective Fictions of Jorge Luis Borges, translated from the Spanish by Andrew Hurley. The stories in here were published between 1899 and 1986, so it spans Borges' entire life. And you can really see the development of his writing and his thematic content that he had. I think you can't not include him when you're talking about some of the greatest writers of all time. Borges wrote so many stories that are massively influential in TV, movies, literature, all over the world, especially in his home country of Argentina. His mind's accessibility through them is absolutely beautiful, and they're transcending what literature can do, sometimes in as short as 1 or 2 pages. I would describe this as kaleidoscopic magical realism, where things are so subtly different from our reality that they seem like a fantasy world. However, tilting the perspective just a little bit can give you just a wider view of what he's trying to do in here, and you're able to find something new, slightly different, that changes your mind on something. I actually went blind in 1955, fully in one eye and partly in one eye, and I would argue that he could see better with part of one eye than many of us can see with both of our eyes. He definitely has that on display in these stories, and I would say you absolutely have to read some of Borges. Finally, my favorite book of all time. A couple people guessed, and had some good guesses, but if you follow me on Instagram, I recently posted this review, and a couple of people noticed the tattoo on my hand, which actually is inspired by this book. That book is Watership Down by Richard Adams. I could go on forever about this book, how much I love the emotion that's there, how much I love the characters that are in this book. And being that they're all rabbits, I think we have a different affinity for how we perceive the characters as rabbits than we do if they were people. It's really about a group of rabbits who go on a journey to find a safe place they can call home after supernatural clairvoyant warning from one of their warren. Everything that humans can go through in a journey like this happens to these rabbits, and I think that we're able to have more empathy and compassion for them than if they were people. Adam said his story here was not metaphorical. I think that may be true. All of our experiences, though, come across subconsciously as something different than what they were, and we infuse them into everything that we do. So I think it's inevitable that this book had some level of metaphorical meaning for him. Ultimately, I think this is about being part of a group and a society that requires you to do your part and helping others in need, relying on each other. And if we can say that we were there for somebody in their time of need, How much more can we ask for? All right, those are my 10 books to get to know me, including my favorite book of all time. Please let me know down below what your favorite books are. What's one book that I should read if I wanted to get to know you? If you enjoyed it, please like. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.